Callan Reed, 31-year-old husband of Sella Vale, shoved her suitcase across the icy porch while snow blew into the open doorway. Sella Vale, 28-year-old wife of Callan Reed, stood shivering in thin shoes as Brina Reed, 59-year-old mother of Callan Reed, blocked her from stepping back inside. Beside them, Nola Greer, 30-year-old mistress of Callan Reed, held Sella's winter coat and smiled like she had won something. Callan pointed toward the street and said, "You were useful when my mother was sick, but tonight you leave with nothing." The neighbors watched through curtains. No one opened a door. No one defended her. Sella kept her face calm, but her hands shook in the freezing air. Her dress was simple, her suitcase had split open in the snow, and her hair was wet against her cheeks. To Callan, Brina, and Nola, she looked like a weak wife with nowhere to go. They forgot she had spent 3 years keeping Brina alive, paying medical bills, tracking medicines, protecting appointment records, organizing Callan's old business files, and quietly preserving the proof of every sacrifice they now wanted erased. Then Marnie Bell, 32-year-old single mother of Bex Bell, stopped across the street. Bex Bell, 8-year-old son of Marnie Bell, tugged her hand and whispered, "Mom, that lady is freezing." Marnie crossed through the snow, removed her only coat, and wrapped it around Sella's shoulders. As the coat closed around Sella, her silver star locket slipped out. Bex stared. "That's the necklace from the missing girl poster," he whispered. What Callan, Brina, and Nola did not know was that Sella was the missing daughter of Orrin Vale, 62-year-old billionaire father who had spent years searching for the child, taken after a winter crash. The same woman they pushed into the cold carried the name, proof, and hidden history that could destroy every lie they had built. While Callan thought Sella was weak, Sella was actually holding his company records, his reputation, and his family's future in her hands. The night Callan tried to break Sella was the night every truth he buried began rising against him. This is not just a story about a wife pushed into freezing cold. It is about what happens when cruel people mock someone they never truly knew, while standing on power that secretly belongs to her. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. Watching without subscribing is like letting Sella's strength be ignored again. When you subscribe, you stand with every quiet soul who was mocked, underestimated, and still chose to rise. Please subscribe now and comment where you're watching from. The first scream came from the monitor. Sella Vale, 28, Callan Reed's wife, and the woman most legal papers still listed under the childhood name Sella Mills, froze at the foot of the hospital bed as the machine beside Brina Reed's pillow began beeping so fast it sounded like it was trying to outrun death. The paper cup slipped from Sella's hand. Water splashed across the white floor. Callan Reed, 31, Sella's husband and Brina Reed's only son, shot up from the plastic chair near the wall. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair was messy, his face looked hollow from 2 nights without sleep and too many phone calls he had refused to answer. His phone fell from his lap. The screen lit up on the floor. Final notice. Callan saw it. So did Sella. He did not pick it up. "Mom," he choked. "Mom, can you hear me?" Brina Reed, 59, Callan's mother and Sella's mother-in-law, lay pale under the hospital blanket. Her fingers curled weakly against the sheet, like she was trying to hold on to something no one else could see. The door burst open. Nurse Elena Moss, 43, the hospital nurse assigned to Brina's room during the night shift, rushed in with a tray of supplies. Behind her came Dr. Edwin Harrow, 56, the attending doctor overseeing Brina's recovery after a dangerous hypertensive crisis that had caused a small stroke scare and heart rhythm complications. "Step back," Dr. Harrow said. Sella moved because she had to, but her heart stayed beside the bed. Callan grabbed Sella's arm. His grip hurt, but she did not pull away. He looked at his mother, then at Sella, and in that moment he was not proud, polished, or powerful. He was just a frightened son. "If she dies," he whispered, "I don't know who I am." Sella looked at him. This was Callan before success, before expensive suits, before cold looks, before he learned to be ashamed of the years when he needed her. Here, in this hospital room, he was broken in front of her. And one day, that weakness would become something he wanted to erase. The monitor slowed after several terrifying minutes. Dr. Harrow checked Brina again, listened to her chest, adjusted the oxygen line, and released a careful breath. "She's stable for now," he said. "For now." Those two words stayed in the room like a warning. Outside the window, snow blew hard across the parking lot. Headlights from passing cars slid over the glass, bright and sudden. Zella flinched. She always did when headlights moved through snow. She did not know why. She only knew her body remembered something her mind refused to show clearly. A road. A crash. Glass breaking. A man shouting, "Little star, stay awake." Cold air cutting her face. A hand reaching for her before everything went dark. Then the memory vanished. Dr. Harrow began explaining the next stage. Brina had survived the worst of the crisis, but survival was not recovery. She would need medication at exact hours, therapy appointments, blood pressure logs, warning sign checks, follow-up visits, emergency contacts, and someone awake enough to notice if her speech changed or her breathing became strained at night. Callan sat down slowly. His phone buzzed again from the floor. Seller saw another notice from a lender tied to Reed Supply, the small logistics business Callan had been trying to save for months. Callan turned the phone over with his shoe so the screen faced down. That small movement told Seller the truth. His business was failing. His mother was sick. He had no money for private care. And he was too ashamed to say it out loud. So Seller said what he could not. "Can you teach me the medication schedule?" she asked. Nurse Elena looked at her. "It is a lot. I can learn." Dr. Harrow studied her carefully. She cannot miss doses. She needs a written chart, daily readings, and someone who understands what symptoms require emergency help. If you take this on, you must keep records. "I will," Seller said. Nurse Elena handed her a blank medication chart. Seller took it like it was a promise. She wrote Brina's name at the top, then the first medicine, then the time, then the dosage. Her handwriting was tired but neat. She did not know that years later, those same careful records would be twisted against her. She did not know someone would call them control instead of care. Right then, they were proof that she was willing to learn how to keep Brina alive. Brina stirred on the bed. Seller moved closer. "Brina." Brina's eyes opened halfway. Her face was full of fear and shame. She reached toward the cup on the table, but her hand shook too badly. "Water," she whispered. Seller helped lift her head and brought the cup to her lips. She let Brina drink slowly, then wiped a drop from her chin with the edge of the sheet. Brina's eyes filled. "Don't let me become a burden," she whispered. Seller's chest tightened. "You're not a burden," she said softly. "You're family." Brina's weak fingers wrapped around Seller's wrist. "My girl," she breathed. Those two words went straight into the empty place Seller had carried since childhood. For a moment, she was 8 years old again, sitting on the edge of a narrow bed in a foster room with yellow walls. Across from her stood Greta Mills, 52, the foster guardian who had raised Seller after claiming no relatives could be found. Little Seller held a silver star-shaped locket in both hands. It was the only thing she had from before. "Did my mother leave because I was hard to love?" Little Seller had asked. Greta did not hug her. She did not soften. She only said, "Some children are found, not chosen." That sentence taught Seller a dangerous lesson. If she wanted to be kept, she had to be useful. So when Brina called her "my girl," Seller believed it. Not because she was foolish. Because she was hungry for family. Mr. Lionel Haynes, 50, The hospital billing clerk responsible for arranging Brina's discharge deposit entered with a folder pressed to his chest. His voice was gentle, which made the news feel worse. "The insurance will cover part of the hospital stay," he said, "but not the home monitoring deposit, the first therapy block, or the private nurse evaluation." Callan stood. "How much?" Mr. Haynes gave the amount. The room went quiet. It was not an impossible amount. It was the kind of amount that destroyed ordinary dreams quietly. Sela knew exactly what it meant. It was almost the same as the money in her small savings account, the money she had saved before marriage for a caregiver certification program. She had wanted to become trained, respected, and paid for the kind of care she naturally gave. Callan covered his mouth. "I don't have it." Sela looked at Brina, trembling under the thin blanket. Then she removed her own coat and laid it over Brina's legs. The coat was old, but warm. Brina stopped shaking as much. "I have savings," Sela said. Callan turned to her. "No, that's for your training. She needs care now." "I'll pay you back," he said quickly. His eyes were wet. "I swear, Sela, I'll never forget this." She wanted to believe him. So she signed. As Sela bent over the payment form, her locket slipped from beneath her blouse. Nurse Elena's eyes dropped to it. The silver star turned under the hospital light. On the back were tiny engraved letters. SV. Nurse Elena's face changed, not loudly, not enough for Callan to notice, but enough for Sela to feel the air shift. "That engraving," Nurse Elena said quietly. "Where did you get that locket?" Sela touched it. "I've had it since before Greta found me." "Greta? The woman who raised me." Nurse Elena stared at the star shape, then at Sela's face, as if an old poster from a hospital social work board had just stepped into the room. Before she could speak again, Brina's monitor began beeping faster. Sela turned toward the bed. Dr. Harrow moved quickly. Callan forgot the bill. Nurse Elena forgot the question. And outside the window, snow kept falling over the roads, hiding a truth that had not stayed buried forever. The pill bottle hit the floor and rolled under the glass table. Sela froze in the doorway. Brina had tried to stand without her cane. For one sharp second, the living room filled with the old fear again, the same fear from the hospital 3 years ago, when machines had screamed and Brina's body had nearly given up. But this time, Brina was not pale in a hospital bed. She was dressed in a cream suit, pearl earrings, and polished shoes, gripping the arm of a velvet chair as if Sela had insulted her by being worried. "I told you I can manage," Brina snapped. Sela stepped forward slowly, holding the weekly medication organizer in one hand and a folder in the other. On the front of the folder, written in her neat handwriting, were the words, "Billionaire Read, Recovery Records." Inside were 3 years of Brina's life, saved on paper. Appointment notes, medication changes, emergency numbers, therapy receipts, blood pressure logs, names of every doctor who had treated her, copies of the discharge instructions from the hospital. Folded near the back was an old brochure for Sela's caregiver certification program, creased and faded from being carried too long and used too little. Sela bent down, picked up the pill bottle, and placed it on the table. "You missed the morning dose," she said gently. "Dr. Harrow said skipping it can make you dizzy." Brina lifted her chin. "You don't have to hover over me like I'm helpless." The words cut deeper than they should have, because Sela remembered when Brina had been helpless. She remembered lifting water to Brina's lips. She remembered counting Brina's steps beside the bed. She remembered sleeping in a chair so Brina would not wake up afraid. But Brina did not look like that woman anymore. The Reed house had changed too. The old couch was gone, new curtains framed the windows, Polished floors reflected expensive light. A large photo hung on the wall, Callan shaking hands with two business partners at his first major expansion event. Seller had been there that night. She had stayed up until morning the week before, sorting old vendor files and flagging overdue notices Callan had nearly missed. One of those notices would have cost Reed Supply its warehouse insurance. Another would have lost him a supplier contract. She had stood beside him before the photo was taken. But in the framed picture, she was not there. On the mantel sat another photo of Callan and Brina smiling at a charity lunch. Seller could see the edge of her own blue sleeve at the corner of the frame, cropped almost completely out. It was strange, being erased while still living in the house. "I'm not trying to control you," Seller said. "I'm trying to keep you safe." Brina gave a short laugh. Safe is not the same as respected. Seller went quiet. That was new. Brina had started using words like that lately. Respect. Control. Image. Space. Words that sounded soft but landed like stones. The front door opened. Callan entered wearing a dark tailored suit Seller had never seen before. His shoes shone, his watch was new, even his walk had changed. 3 years ago, he had sat in a hospital chair with unpaid notices buzzing on his phone. Now he carried himself like every room owed him admiration. His eyes moved to the folder in Seller's hand, and his face tightened. "You don't need to keep dragging those old papers around," he said. Seller held the folder closer. "Your mother's doctor asked for her history before the next checkup. That was years ago. She still has checkups." Callan looked away. He never liked the folder. He never liked the receipts. They reminded him of a time when his mother needed Seller more than him, and his business had survived only because Seller had quietly held the rest of his life together. Brina's eyes moved to Seller's coat hanging near the door. It was the same plain winter coat Seller had worn through hospital nights, pharmacy trips, therapy visits, and winter mornings when she barely slept. Brina's mouth curved. "Are you wearing that to the investor lunch?" Seller looked down. "I was not invited." "Good," Brina said. "That coat makes you look small town and tired. A woman beside Callan now should understand presentation." Callan did not defend her. A knock came at the door. Amos Pike, 46, a local courier who regularly delivered packages around the neighborhood, stood outside holding a gold box tied with white ribbon. "Package for Mrs. Reed," he said. Brina smiled before she even opened it. Inside was a silk scarf, soft and expensive. A small card rested on top. Seller read it before Brina could hide it. For Brina, a woman of grace, from someone who understands what Callan deserves. N. Callan moved too quickly. He took the card from Brina's fingers and slid it into his jacket pocket. Seller looked at him. "Who is N?" Brina wrapped the scarf around her neck and smiled. "Someone with manners." Callan's phone was in his hand now. Seller noticed. He turned the screen away before unlocking it. A new password. Again. He had changed it twice in 1 month. There was also a different cologne on his coat lately, sharper and sweeter than the one she bought him. Yesterday, she had found a restaurant receipt folded too carefully in his wallet before he took it back. She had said nothing. The old Seller from the foster room still lived inside her, whispering that if she asked too much, people might send her away. Outside the window, Marnie Bell, 32, a single mother who worked coat-check shifts at private events and took laundry jobs from elderly clients to support her son, passed the Reed house carrying a clean laundry bundle for a neighbor. Her son, Bex Bell, 8, walked beside her holding a paper grocery bag against his chest. Bex slowed when he saw Seller through the window, arranging Brina's pills. "Mom," he asked, "is that lady a nurse?" Marnie looked once, long enough to see Seller's careful hands and sad face. Maybe, she said quietly, or maybe she's just someone who cares too much. Inside, Callan kissed Brina's cheek and said he would wait in the car. Brina followed him proudly, wearing the scarf from N. Sela was left alone in the living room with the folder, the pills, and the pictures that had removed her. As she gathered the medication chart, something slipped from Callan's coat pocket on the chair. The restaurant receipt. 2 dinners. 2 desserts. 1 expensive bottle of wine. On the back, in neat handwriting, were the words, "She'll sign once she understands she has no leverage." Sela folded the receipt with shaking hands. Then Callan's phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up with a name she had never seen before. Nola Greer, 30, a polished investor relations consultant from Callan's new business circle, whose exact place in his life Sela had not yet understood. And somehow, before Sela even touched the phone, the room felt colder than the snow outside. Sela almost dropped the folder when Brina's voice snapped through the phone. "Callan forgot the blue file," Brina said. "The one with the old vendor papers and loan copies. Bring it now before you embarrass him." Sela stood in the hallway of the Reed house, still holding the restaurant receipt she had found earlier. Her hands were cold. On the back of that receipt, someone had written, "She'll sign once she understands she has no leverage." Now Brina wanted her to carry Callan's business folder to a dinner she had not been invited to. "Why does he need it tonight?" Sela asked. Brina sighed. "Because important people are there, Sela. Wear something decent if you insist on walking inside." The call ended. Sela stared at the silent phone. Something felt wrong, but she still moved. That was what 3 years of being useful had taught her. When the Reed family needed something, Sela came. The blue folder was in Callan's study. It was thick with old vendor agreements, emergency loan papers, supplier notices, warehouse insurance letters, and notes from the year his company almost collapsed. Sela knew the folder well because she had organized most of it while Brina was recovering. During those months, she had counted Brina's pills with one hand and sorted Callan's overdue invoices with the other. Callan's success had not grown from nothing. It had grown quietly on nights Sela never spoke about. She changed into a simple dark dress, brushed her hair, and put on her plain winter coat. Then she took the folder and left. The restaurant was warmer than she expected. Soft golden lights hung over white tables. Business guests laughed over expensive plates. Women wore elegant dresses. Men wore polished suits. The room smelled of wine, perfume, and money. Sela stopped near the entrance. She was neat, but she was not dressed for this room. At the coat check stand stood Marnie Bell, the same single mother who had passed the Reed house earlier that day. She wore a black work blouse, tired eyes, and a polite smile that looked practiced from years of dealing with people who barely saw her. Behind the staff partition, Beck sat with a coloring book and a snack bag. The restaurant manager allowed him to stay there during late shifts because Marnie could not always afford childcare. Marnie looked at Sela's face, then at the folder in her arms, and her smile faded a little. Before Sela could speak, she saw Callan. He stood near the center table with Brina beside him. And next to Callan stood Nola Greer. Nola wore the silk scarf from the gold box. The same scarf sent to Brina. The same scarf signed only with the letter N. Sela's stomach tightened. Callan saw her and stiffened as if she had walked in carrying shame instead of papers. He came toward her quickly. "Why would you walk in here like this?" Sela held up the folder. "Your mother said you needed these." Callan looked toward Brina. Brina sat calmly with her hands folded, pretending innocence. Her face carried a soft little smile, as if Sela had stepped exactly where she was meant to step. Nola moved closer. She was beautiful in a clean, sharp way, like every gesture had been practiced. "You must be Sela," Nola said. "Brina told me you were very helpful when she was ill." Helpful. The word landed like a servant's name. Sela looked at Callan, waiting for him to correct her. Waiting for him to say, "This is my wife." He did not. Sela lifted her chin. "I'm Callan's wife." Nola smiled gently, but her eyes did not soften. "Of course, I only meant every successful man has people who helped him along the way." A few guests turned slightly. Not fully. Just enough. That was the cruel part. Nobody wanted to stare, but everyone wanted to hear. Sela felt heat rise in her face. Then, behind Nola's perfume and the clink of glasses, she remembered another room. A hospital room. Brina's fingers gripping her wrist. Brina whispering, "Please don't leave me with strangers." Now Brina watched her like she was the stranger. Nola stepped closer to Callan's side. Callan needs someone who can stand beside him in rooms like this. For half a second, Sela could not breathe. Then she said quietly, "I stood beside him in hospital rooms when no one else could." The table went still. Callan's jaw tightened. This is not the place. He did not say it was untrue. He only hated that she had said it where people could hear. Pen Alder, 42, Callan's business partner and the operations director who helped manage Reed's supply contracts, stood near the table with a glass in his hand. His eyes dropped to the blue folder. He recognized the old loan papers sticking out from the side because some of those emergency files had saved the company's warehouse contract 3 years earlier. Callan noticed. He snatched the folder from Sela too quickly. Penn's face changed just a little. Milo Kent, 24, a restaurant server working the private dinner, stepped around the table with a tray of glasses. His elbow brushed the folder in Callan's hand. A few papers slid out and scattered across the floor. Sela bent to pick them up. So did Nola. One paper landed near Nola's shoe. It was not a vendor agreement. It was one of Brina's old home care payment receipts, copied and tucked inside the folder because Sela had used the same scanner when organizing both Brina's medical records and Callan's business documents. Sela's name was clearly written on it. Nola read it. Her smile became smaller. Now she knew. She knew Sela had paid. She knew there was proof. Before Sela could reach for it, Nola folded the paper once and tucked it beneath the edge of her scarf as if helping gather the mess. Callan pushed the rest of the papers back into the folder. "Go home, Sela." The words were low, but Marnie heard them from the coat check stand. So did Bex, who had stopped coloring. Sela looked at Brina one last time. Brina looked away. That hurt more than Nola's smile. Sela turned and walked back toward the entrance. Marnie lifted Sela's coat from the rack and handed it to her carefully. Then Marnie said quietly, "Some rooms are colder inside than outside." Sela looked at her, surprised by the kindness of a stranger. Behind her, Nola touched Callan's sleeve and whispered something too soft to hear. Callan looked back at Sela. This time, there was no guilt in his eyes. Only warning. Sela slipped her hand into her coat pocket as she stepped outside. The receipt was still there. But one document from the blue folder was gone. And somehow, Sela knew Nola had not taken it by accident. Sela stopped halfway down the stairs when she heard Nola's voice inside her living room. Not near the door. Not in the hallway. Inside. Sela gripped the railing. For a moment, she could not move. The Reed house had already become cold to her, but this was different. Nola was not hiding behind perfume, receipts, or initials anymore. She was sitting openly in Sela's home. When Sela reached the bottom step, she saw everything at once. Nola sat on the sofa with her legs crossed, calm and polished, as if she had been invited many times before. Brina sat beside her in a dark green dress, her cane leaning against the chair, her face full of quiet approval. Callan stood near the fireplace, tense but silent. Beside the doorway stood Dax Miller, 38, the Reed family's part-time driver and household assistant, who sometimes helped Callan with errands, deliveries, and house access when business guests arrived. Dax looked uncomfortable, but he did not leave. On the coffee table lay one paper. Sela recognized it before she reached the room. It was Brina's old medical receipt from the business dinner. The one that had gone missing. Nola touched the edge of it with one finger. "I was concerned when I saw this." Sela's voice came out low. "Why do you have that?" Nola looked up, almost gentle, "Because it explains a pattern." Callan's jaw tightened. Sela looked at him first, waiting for him to ask Nola the same question. He did not. Nola leaned back. "You paid Brina's medical bills, you kept appointment records, you tracked every pill, every doctor, every emergency number." She gave a small smile. "At first, it sounds loving." "It was loving," Sela said. "Or," Nola continued, "it was a way to make yourself impossible to remove." The room went quiet. Sela stared at her. For a second, she did not understand how anyone could take 3 years of sacrifice and turn it into something ugly. Then Brina spoke. "At first, I thought you cared," Brina said. "Now I wonder if you enjoyed having me helpless." The words struck Sela harder than shouting. She looked at Brina and saw 2 women at once. The woman in the hospital bed, weak and ashamed, whispering, "Don't let me become a burden." And this woman now, dressed in fine fabric, sitting beside Nola like a judge. "You asked me not to leave you with strangers," Sela said. Brina's mouth tightened, "and you have reminded me ever since." Sela shook her head. "No, I never did that." "You didn't have to," Brina said. "Every chart, every pill box, every appointment reminder, you made sure I never forgot what I was." Sela's eyes burned. Now she understood. Brina did remember. That was the problem. Sela reminded her of weakness. Nola reminded her of pearls, lunches, admiration. And the version of herself she wanted people to see. For months, Nola had brought gifts, praised Callan, and called Brina the woman behind his greatness. She had made Brina feel important again. Sela had made her feel alive. Nola made her feel powerful. And Brina had chosen power. "I kept those records because missing one medication could have put you back in the hospital," Sela said. Nola tilted her head. "Or maybe you liked being the only one who understood the chart." Sela turned to Callan. "Do you believe that?" He looked at the fire instead of her. "I believe you never learned where helping ends and holding on begins." That was his betrayal before he ever touched the door. Sela's hand moved to the locket at her neck. She did it without thinking. Callan had always hated those old records because they reminded him of the man he used to be, the man with unpaid notices, shaking hands, and no money for his mother's care. Nola had given him a cleaner story. Sela was not loyal. She was controlling. If he believed that, he did not have to feel guilty. A knock came at the door. Dax opened it before anyone answered. Penn stepped inside, holding a contract envelope. "Callan, I need your signature on the revised transfer packet before morning." He stopped when he saw Sela. Callan crossed the room too fast. "Leave it with me." Penn's eyes dropped to the paper on the coffee table, then to the envelope in his hand. "Actually, I had a question. Why is Sela's name already typed on the spousal consent page?" Sela looked up. Callan's face hardened. "This is not the time." Penn frowned. "Her signature line is already marked. That page is not optional if you are moving marital assets before the expansion review. Nola stood smoothly. It is only a draft, pen. Business paperwork can look confusing before it is finalized. But Seller had heard enough. Spousal consent. Marital assets. Signature line. Marked. Brina reached for her cane, irritated by the interruption. As she stood, her fingers caught Seller's wrist. The movement pulled Seller's locket out from under her blouse. The silver star turned in the light. Nola's eyes fixed on the back. Veil. Seller pulled the locket close. Nola smiled faintly. I thought you said you had no family. I don't, Seller said. Then why wear a dead name like it means something? Seller's face went still. Penn looked between them, uneasy. Dax lowered his eyes. Callan said nothing. One by one, they left the room after Callan muttered that the conversation was over. But Seller did not go upstairs. She waited until the house became quiet, then walked to Callan's study. The drawer was not fully closed. Inside were the asset papers. Her legal name was typed clearly. Seller Mills Reed. Under it was a penciled imitation of her signature. Beside the papers sat a sticky note in Nola's neat handwriting. Fear works faster than guilt. Seller heard footsteps behind her. She turned. Callan was standing in the doorway. His face told her the cold outside was not the only danger coming. Sign it tonight. Callan's voice cracked across the study like a whip. Seller stood near his desk, one hand still on the drawer where she had found the papers. Outside, the winter storm pressed against the windows. Snow scratched the glass. Wind moved around the house like something hungry. Callan stood in the doorway, blocking her way out. On the desk lay the divorce agreement, the asset waiver, and a sworn statement saying Seller had made no financial or operational contribution to his company or family property. Her legal name was typed at the bottom. Seller Mills Reed. Beneath it was the penciled copy of her signature. Beside the papers sat Nola's note. Fear works faster than guilt. Seller looked from the note to Callan. You were going to scare me into signing this. Callan's face hardened. I was going to protect what I built. What you built, Seller's voice shook, but she did not step back. I paid for your mother's recovery when you had nothing. I organized your old vendor files while you slept in hospital chairs. I gave up my training so you could keep working. His eyes flashed. Do not make yourself the hero of my life. Before Seller could answer, Brina's cane tapped against the hall floor. She appeared behind Callan, dressed in a robe that looked too elegant for a woman pretending to be fragile. Nola stood beside her near the fireplace, calm and comfortable, holding a glass of wine like she belonged there. Nola was even wearing soft house slippers. Seller stared at them and understood. This was not a fight that had suddenly happened. This was a meeting they had planned. Callan picked up the papers and pushed them toward her. Sign it. No. The word came out small, but it landed hard. Brina's mouth twisted. After everything my son has done for you, you still want to take from him. Seller turned to her slowly. Everything he did for me. I gave up my savings, my future, and 3 years of my life to keep you alive. For one moment, the storm outside was the only sound. Then Brina said, and you have been collecting payment in pity ever since. Seller felt the words go through her. She remembered Brina in the hospital, shaking beneath a thin blanket. She remembered laying her own coat over Brina's legs. She remembered Brina whispering, my girl. Now that same woman looked at her like care had been a crime. Nola stepped closer. Callan, she's stalling because she thinks tears can still buy her time. Seller wiped her face quickly. She had not even realized she was crying. Nola walked to the coat rack near the front door and lifted Sella's old winter coat. The same coat Sella had worn through hospital nights, pharmacy lines, therapy visits, and winter mornings when she barely slept. Nola slipped it over her shoulders. "This is heavier than it looks," she said, smoothing the sleeves. "No wonder you always seemed tired." Sella reached for it. "That's mine." Nola stepped back. Callan's voice went cold. "Leave it, you won't need it where you're going." Sella stared at him. Outside, the snow was falling harder. Dax stepped into the hall, uncomfortable and silent. Callan pointed toward the stairs. "Pack her suitcase." Dax hesitated. "Mr. Reid, the storm." "Now," Callan said. Dax lowered his eyes and obeyed. Sella turned to Callan. "You are throwing me out in this weather." "You refused to sign." "I refused to lie." Brina moved to her chair near the window and sat like a judge. "Maybe the cold will teach you humility." Dax returned with Sella's suitcase. Some of her clothes were folded badly, some were half hanging out. He carried it to the open front door and set it outside on the icy step. The wind rushed in. Sella wrapped her arms around herself. "My phone, my purse." Nola smiled. "Those can be returned after the papers are signed. We do not need you running around with private company information while confused." Now Sella understood the full cruelty. They were not only removing her from the house. They were trying to leave her with nothing but fear. Callan stepped close. "Go." Sella looked at him through the open doorway. Warm light spilled around him. Behind him stood Brina. Beside him stood Nola, wearing Sella's coat. "You promised you would never forget," Sella whispered. Callan's face did not soften. "I remember enough to know I outgrew you." Then he pushed the suitcase farther out with his foot. The suitcase tipped. It opened in the snow. Sella stepped outside to catch it. The cold struck her instantly. Her thin shoes sank into the icy path. Snow blew against her dress and melted into her hair. The door stayed open, just long enough for her to see Nola slide her hand through Callan's arm. Across the street, Marnie stopped walking. She had just finished dropping laundry at an elderly client's house on the Reed block. Bex stood beside her, holding a small grocery bag from the shelter pantry to his chest. His eyes widened when he saw Sella's suitcase on the ground. "Mom," he whispered, "that's the lady from the restaurant." Marnie looked at Sella, then at the open door, then at Nola wearing the coat. Her face changed. She had seen enough at the dinner to understand what kind of pain this was. The Reed door began to close. Marnie crossed the street fast. She removed her own coat as she walked. It was worn, thin, and missing a button. Bex shivered beside her, but he did not complain. Sella shook her head weakly. "No, your son." "My son and I can walk fast," Marnie said. "You look like you can't walk at all." She wrapped the coat around Sella's shoulders. The warmth was small, but it nearly broke her. As Marnie pulled the coat closed, Sella's silver star locket slipped out. Bex stared at it. "Mom," he whispered, "she has the star necklace." Marnie frowned. "What star necklace?" "The missing girl," Bex said. "The one on the poster at the shelter pantry. The old man still sends new copies every winter." Sella blinked through the snow. "My father is dead." Across the street, the Reed door had not fully closed. Nola stood behind the window, staring at the locket. Her face had lost its smile. At the curb, Penn's car slowed. He had come back because the transfer packet troubled him and because Callan had ignored his calls. Now he saw Sella outside without a coat, Nola wearing hers, and Marnie holding her upright. Marnie guided Sella away from the house. Bex kept looking at the locket. "Mom," he whispered again. The poster said her father never stopped looking. Behind the glass, Nola lifted her phone. And this time, the cold in her eyes had nothing to do with winter. Sela almost fell on the stairs. Marnie caught her with one arm while holding Bex back with the other. The narrow steps behind the closed storefront were slick from melted snow, and Sela's thin shoes had no grip. Her body shook so badly that Marnie had to half-carry her up the last few steps. "Almost there," Marnie said. "Just hold on." Sela tried to answer, but her teeth were chattering too hard. Marnie unlocked a faded brown door and pushed it open with her shoulder. Warm air touched Sela's face, weak but real. The room was small. One noisy heater rattled under the window. A narrow bed sat against the wall. A child's blanket was folded on a chair. A pot of soup warmed on a portable burner near a small table. It was nothing like the Reed house. The Reed house had tall windows, polished floors, and cruelty hiding under warm light. Marnie's room was cramped, tired, and safe. Sela lowered herself onto the chair, still wrapped in Marnie's coat. Her fingers gripped the front of it like she was afraid someone would take even this away. "I'm sorry," Sela whispered. "Your coat." Marnie shut the door against the wind. "Don't apologize for surviving." The words were simple. That was why they broke something open inside Sela. Bex pulled the folded child's blanket from the chair and brought it to her. The blanket was old, with faded stars across it. When he laid it over Sela's knees, one tiny star rested beside her silver locket. Bex noticed it again. He did not speak yet, but his eyes stayed on the locket. Sela looked around the room, trying to steady herself. On the table was a court envelope. Beside it was a child support notice, stamped unpaid. Near the bed sat a pair of cracked work shoes. On the wall was a small photo of Marnie pregnant and alone, one hand over her stomach, smiling like she had decided not to let the world see her fear. Beside it was a school paper in Bex's handwriting. "My mom is brave." Sela swallowed hard. Marnie had almost nothing. Yet she had given away her coat. "You didn't have to help me," Sela said. Marnie stirred the soup, not looking at her at first. "Years ago, when I was pregnant with Bex, a man promised me a future. Then his family said I would ruin him. One winter night, he left me outside a clinic and drove away." Sela lifted her eyes. Marnie gave a small, tired smile. "Some doors don't just close, they teach you who was never inside with you." For a while, no one spoke. Then Sela's strength gave out. She covered her mouth and began to cry quietly, not loudly, not dramatically, just the broken sound of someone who had been holding herself together too long. "I gave her 3 years," Sela said. "I knew every pill, every appointment, every fear. I knew when Brina's hands shook, when her breathing changed, when she was scared to sleep." Her voice cracked. "She once begged me not to leave her with strangers. Tonight she told me maybe the cold would teach me humility." Marnie did not rush to explain it away. She did not say maybe, they did not mean it. She did not defend people who had hurt Sela. She only listened. That made Sela cry harder. Across town, inside the Reed house, Nola stood near the window with her phone in her hand. She had seen the locket. She had seen the name Vale on the back earlier. She had seen Bex recognize it in the snow. She did not know enough yet, but she knew enough to be afraid. She searched the words quickly. Silver Star Locket. SV. Missing Girl. Orin Vale. The first old article that appeared made her fingers tighten around the phone. A billionaire's wife dead after winter crash. Daughter missing. Silver Star Locket never recovered. Nola's face changed. She sent Callan a message. "Find where she went. If she talks about those papers, you lose everything." A second message followed. "Say she is unstable. Say she stole documents. Move first." Back in Marnie's room, Bex finally spoke. "I saw that necklace before." Marnie turned. "Bex, don't stare." "I'm not staring," he said. "I really saw it." Sela touched the locket. Where? At the shelter pantry, Bex said, where we get groceries sometimes. There's an old poster near the bulletin board. A little girl had a star necklace like that. Marnie frowned. Baby, lots of necklaces look alike. Bex shook his head. No, it had letters too, S and V, and the poster said she went missing after a winter crash. Sela's body went still. A sound rose inside her memory before she could stop it. Headlights spinning. Cold air. A man's hand reaching for her. A voice saying, "Little star, keep your eyes open." The locket pressing into her neck. A woman screaming a name Sela could not hear clearly. Then it was gone. Sela pressed her hand against her chest. What name was on the poster? Bex thought hard. Orin Vale. The name hurt. She did not know why, but it did. Orin Vale, 62, was the billionaire businessman named on the missing child poster as the father still searching for his daughter. Sela did not know that yet. To her, the name was only a sound that made the room tilt. My father is dead, she said weakly. The woman who raised me said my parents died before anyone could claim me. Marnie's voice became careful. Did she show you proof? Sela opened her mouth. No answer came. Because Greta Mills had given her rules, chores, and silence. Never proof. Marnie reached for her phone. I know someone at the shelter. A short while later, Dovey Lane, 58, a practical community shelter worker who had helped Marnie through pregnancy, unpaid rent scares, and pantry appointments, answered the call. Marnie explained the locket, the poster, the winter crash, and what had happened outside the Reed house. Dovey's voice turned serious. Do not call the number on the poster yet from your personal phone. If this is real, people with money will come fast. We need the right people first, not the loudest people first. Marnie looked at Sela. She's freezing and scared. Keep her warm, give her soup if she can drink it. I'm coming with the poster copy from the shelter office. Marnie offered Sela the bed. Sela shook her head. Bex needs it. Bex looked down. You can have it. I sleep on the floor when Mom works late anyway. Sela stared at him, and the kindness of that poor little room hurt more than the cruelty of the rich house. Minutes later, Dovey arrived with snow on her coat and an old folded poster sealed in a plastic sleeve. She opened it on the table. The paper was worn, but the picture was clear enough. A little girl with wide eyes. A silver star locket. The initials SV. Marnie looked from the poster to Sela. Sela touched her locket and whispered, That girl has my necklace. Then someone knocked hard on Marnie's door. Not once, 3 times. And every face in the room turned toward the sound, as if the past had finally found the stairs. The third knock shook Marnie's door. Bex grabbed his mother's sleeve. Sela sat frozen at the small table, one hand on the old missing child poster and the other around her silver locket. The soup on the burner bubbled softly, but nobody looked at it. Marnie moved toward the door. Who is it? Callan's voice came from the other side. Open the door, Sela. Sela's stomach turned. Marnie looked back at her. Dovey quietly slid the poster into its plastic sleeve again, not hiding it completely, only protecting it from the wrong eyes. Marnie opened the door only as far as the chain allowed. Callan stood in the hallway, snow on his coat and anger in his face. Behind him stood Nola, wearing an expensive black coat now, not Sela's old one. Her hair was perfect, her lips were calm, but her eyes went straight to Sela's locket. We came to check on my wife, Callan said. Marnie did not move. You left your wife outside without a coat. Callan's jaw tightened. This is family business. Nola looked Marnie up and down. Women like you should be careful who they shelter. Bex stepped closer to Sela. Sela saw that, and something inside her woke up. She had been shaking all night, but now a child was afraid because of her pain. She stood slowly. How did you find me? She asked. Callan looked away. Nola answered for him. Dax saw which direction you went, and I remembered the coat check woman from the dinner. You were hard to forget. Sela understood. Nola had followed the small thread because she was afraid of what Sela might say. Callan pushed against the door. The chain held. Sela, come home before this becomes worse. Home was where you left me freezing. His face darkened. You walked out with documents that do not belong to you. Sela stared at him. I walked out with nothing. You kept my phone and purse. Nola's voice stayed sweet. Careful. You are staying in a stranger's room after removing business papers from Callan's study. That can sound like theft or confusion. Dovey lifted her phone slightly from beside the table. She did not interrupt. She only took pictures. Callan at the door, Nola behind him, Sela wrapped in Marnie's coat, the old poster sleeve on the table, Sela's pale face, and the wet shoes near the heater. Dovey had worked long enough with shelters to know that unsafe expulsions had to be documented before powerful people changed the story. Marnie stepped fully between them and Sela. You don't get to call yourself concerned now, she said, not after what you did. Callan looked past her. Sela, you are nothing without my name. Sela's hand tightened around the locket. For years, those words might have broken her, but behind her was a poster with a little girl wearing the same star necklace. Beside her was a woman who had given her a coat with no reward promised. In front of her was a man more afraid of missing papers than her frozen hands. She lifted her chin. Then why are you scared of mine? Nola's face changed. Only for a second. Callan looked at the locket too, and Nola quickly touched his arm. We should go, she said. She is clearly being influenced. Marnie closed the door before they could say more. For a moment, the room stayed silent. Then Sela sank back into the chair. Dovey placed the poster flat on the table again. This was not just a random poster, she said. For years, an investigator working for Orenvale has sent these to shelters, clinics, food pantries, and emergency housing offices. Every winter, new copies come. Sela looked at the little girl in the picture. The same wide eyes. The same star locket. The same initials. SV. Dovey continued, the poster says Orenvale lost his wife and daughter in a winter crash. His wife died. His daughter's body was never found. They believed someone pulled a child from the wreck before help arrived. Sela felt the room tilt. Dovey pointed gently to the lower part of the poster. It says the child had a silver star locket, initials SV, and a small crescent mark near her left collarbone. Marnie looked at Sela carefully. Sela pulled the coat tighter. People like that don't lose children like me. Marnie's voice softened. Maybe that's how they lost you. Everyone assumed you couldn't belong to someone important. Sela looked down. Greta's old words returned. Some children are found, not chosen. Dovey reached for her phone. I'm calling from the shelter line, not Marnie's number. If this is real, we do it properly. The number on the poster rang twice. A man answered. Abel Rusk, 55, Orenvale's private investigator, and the man who had led the search for Oren's missing daughter for years, spoke carefully. He sounded professional, tired, and cautious. Dovey explained the locket, the initials, the poster, the winter memories, the crescent mark, and Sela's situation. Abel did not rush. There have been false leads before, he said. I need a photo of the locket, the engraving, and confirmation of the mark. I also need to know whether she is safe. Dovey looked toward the door, for now. Across the street, inside Callan's car, Nola gripped her phone. If that locket proves anything, we are finished, she told Callan. A woman with no family is easy to erase, a veil is not. Callan swallowed. She still has nothing, no phone, no money, no lawyer. Nola turned to him. You still don't understand. If she is Oren Vale's daughter, she was never the powerless one. She was just the one you convinced not to look. Back in Marnie's room, Marnie's phone buzzed. A voicemail appeared from Penn. Sela did not open it yet. Dovey handed her the shelter phone instead. Abel's voice became quieter. "May I speak to her?" Sela hesitated, then whispered, "Hello." The line went silent. Then Abel said carefully, "I need to ask you something only Mr. Vale's daughter used to say when she was frightened." Sela's hand tightened around the phone. Before Abel could ask, the lower windowpane cracked. A stone wrapped in cloth hit the floor. Bex cried out. Marnie pulled him behind her. Dovey moved toward the window, but did not touch the stone. The cloth around it carried one sentence. "Give back what you stole, or the boy gets dragged into this too." And the little room that had felt safe suddenly understood it had been found. The stone lay on Marnie's floor like a warning. For one frozen second, nobody moved. Then Bex began to cry. Marnie grabbed him and pulled him away from the cracked window so fast the chair behind him fell over. Sela stepped toward them, still wrapped in Marnie's coat, her face white with fear. "This is because of me," Sela whispered. "I should leave." "No," Marnie said, holding Bex close. "People like them count on good women running away to protect everyone else." Dovey picked up the note with a napkin, careful not to smear it. Her hands shook, but her voice stayed firm. "Nobody touches anything else." The note was short. "Give back what you stole, or the boy gets dragged into this too." Sela covered her mouth. Bex was only a child. He had given her a blanket. He had noticed a necklace. That was all. Now Callan and Nola's fear had reached into Marnie's small room. On the phone, Abel heard the panic. "What happened?" he asked sharply. Dovey explained while taking pictures of the broken window, the stone, the note, and Sela's condition. She also photographed the old missing child poster on the table and Marnie's coat around Sela's shoulders. "This is now a safety issue," Abel said. "Do not leave with anyone who comes from the Reed house. I am sending a car, shelter support, and a female legal assistant, not just men in suits. She needs to feel safe." That one sentence made Sela look at the phone differently. Abel was not treating her like property. He was treating her like someone who had a choice. Downstairs, a loud voice rose near the building entrance. Dovey moved to the door and looked through the small peephole. Dax stood below in the stairwell, snow on his shoulders, trying to look official and failing. "I was sent to collect stolen property," he called. "The locket belongs to the Reed family." Dovey opened the door, only enough to speak through the chain. "Show proof." Dax blinked. "Mrs. Greer said." "Mrs. Greer is not the law," Dovey said. Dax had no paper. No receipt. No legal claim. Only fear in his eyes and someone else's order in his mouth. After another weak threat, he left. Sela touched the locket. Now she understood why Nola wanted it. Not because it belonged to the Reeds. Because it did not. A short while later, a quiet black car stopped outside the building. Abel arrived first, careful and serious. With him came Leona Price, 41, a female legal assistant from the Vale family's office sent to protect Sela's rights and document her consent, and Dr. Myra Sane, 46, a private physician asked to verify medical details gently and make sure Sela's cold exposure was not being ignored. Abel did not rush toward Sela. He stood back. "Sela," he said gently, "may I see the locket?" She hesitated. Marnie nodded once, letting her know she did not have to hand it over unless she wanted to. Sela unclasped the chain and placed the locket on the table. Abel photographed the front first. A silver star. Old edges. Tiny scratches. Then he turned it over. The initials SV caught the light. His face changed. This was custom-made, Abel said quietly. Oren Vale had it made for his daughter when she was 4. He called her his little star. The initials were engraved by her mother. Sella's breathing changed. Little star. The words opened something. She saw a man lifting her onto his shoulders near a winter charity event. She smelled pine trees and cold leather seats. She felt a woman's hands fastening the locket around her neck. Then headlights spun. Glass cracked. Someone carried her away while she cried for her father. The room came back slowly. Abel opened a secure video call. Oren Vale, 62, the billionaire businessman who had spent years searching for the daughter taken after the crash that killed his wife, appeared on the screen. His hair was silver at the temples. His face was controlled, but his eyes looked like they had been waiting for too many years. He did not cry at once. He did not call her daughter. He only asked, "May I see the back of the locket?" Leona held it toward the camera. Oren leaned closer. His hand came to his mouth. "There," he whispered, "that tiny scratch near the star point. She dropped it on the stone steps the week before the accident." Sella's eyes filled, but she stepped back. "If you were looking, why didn't you find me?" The question hurt everyone in the room. Oren answered slowly. "I searched hospitals, agencies, records, graves, shelters, private homes, and towns people told me were too small to matter, but someone changed your name before I knew where to look." Abel explained the rest carefully. There had been a winter crash. Oren survived but was unconscious. His wife died. Emergency workers found signs that a child had been removed before help arrived. Later, an injured child was taken to a rural clinic under another name. The paperwork was incomplete. The woman who raised Sella had either hidden the truth or accepted a story that was never checked. "The locket stayed the same," Abel said. "That is why we never stopped asking about it." Dr. Myra gently confirmed the small crescent mark below Sella's left collarbone after asking Sella's permission and giving her privacy. Oren closed his eyes when Leona told him. "Because her mother kissed that mark every night," he said. Sella broke then, not fully, but enough for Marnie to reach for her hand. The test followed quickly but carefully. Cheek swabs from Sella, a comparison sample from Oren's secured medical file, locket photos, birthmark documentation, old clinic dates, and an emergency kinship screen. Leona explained it clearly. The first result can support immediate protection, but the legally certified report will still take longer. No one is asking you to believe a miracle in one night. Sella nodded. That mattered. It was not magic. It was evidence, finally, finding the right door. Across town, Callan paced while Nola argued beside him. "Even if she is connected to them, she was still my wife," he said. Nola's voice cut through him. "That is exactly the problem. You threw a veil out in the snow." When Brina heard, she laughed at first. Then she remembered Nurse Elena staring at the locket in the hospital. She remembered Sella flinching at snowy headlights. She remembered the initials on the star. Her face went pale. "Then we must be careful what we admit," she said. Hours later, Abel's phone rang. He read the preliminary result once. Then again. He looked at Oren on the video call, then at Sella. "The emergency screen is not the final court report," he said, "but it shows a direct parent-child match." Oren slowly stood. Abel's voice lowered. "Mr. Vale, she is your daughter." Before anyone could breathe, Marnie's phone rang. The screen showed an unknown number. Marnie answered on speaker, but did not hand the phone over. Callan's voice came through, soft for the first time in years. "Sella, sweetheart, we need to talk before strangers turn you against your family." "Sella, sweetheart." The word made everyone in the room go still. Seller looked at the phone as if it had turned sharp. Only hours ago, Callan had called her nothing without his name. He had left her in the snow without her coat, phone, or purse. Now, after hearing the name Vale, his voice had become soft. "Seller," Callan said again, "we need to talk before strangers turn you against your family." Seller looked at Orin on the screen. Then at Marnie, who still had one hand on Bex's shoulder. Then at Abel, who waited quietly, giving her the choice. For the first time in years, Seller did not answer like a wife begging to be believed. "You can speak to my lawyer," she said. Then Marnie ended the call. The silence after that felt different. It did not feel empty. It felt protected. Orin's face was calm, but his eyes were hard. "I can bury him in lawsuits by morning." Seller looked down at her locket. Part of her wanted that. Part of her wanted Callan, Brina, and Nola to feel even a small piece of what they had done. But the longer she sat there, the clearer her heart became. "I don't want revenge for entertainment," she said. "I want the truth where everyone can see it." Orin nodded slowly. "Then that is what we will do." Harper Voss, 45, the lead attorney from Orin's legal team, assigned to protect Seller and review the Reed documents, arrived before sunrise with 2 paralegals and a calm voice that made panic feel smaller. She spread the files across Dovey's small table. The evidence did not look dramatic at first. Receipts, photos, messages, medical charts, a voicemail from Penn. But together, they told a story Callan could not rewrite. There were Seller's payment receipts for Brina's aftercare, records showing she delayed her caregiver training, photos Dovey had taken after the expulsion, Marnie's statement about the coat and the cold, Penn's voicemail about the suspicious spousal consent page, Dax's text admitting Callan sent him after the locket, screenshots of Nola's message telling Callan to say Seller was unstable, and the note thrown through Marnie's window. Truth, Seller realized, did not need to scream. It only needed to be organized. The next afternoon, Callan stood inside a polished conference room, smiling too widely in front of his investors. Brina sat near the front in jewelry and a dark dress, looking like the proud mother of a rising man. Nola stood beside Callan in a cream suit, close enough for everyone to understand her place without anyone saying it aloud. At the head of the table sat Warren Pike, 58, the chairman of the investor board, reviewing Callan's company expansion and the temporary asset transfers tied to the deal. Around him were business guests, partners, and 2 board members. The meeting mattered because Callan needed the board to approve a bridge investment before his company's cash flow problem became visible. The spousal consent page was part of that packet because some assets had been purchased during the marriage. That was why he needed Seller's signature. That was why he had tried to scare her first. Callan was speaking when the doors opened. Seller walked in. Not alone. Orin entered beside her. Abel followed. Harper carried a leather file. Dovey came behind them as the shelter witness who had documented the expulsion. Marnie stood beside Seller, simple coat, tired eyes, chin lifted. Bex was not brought into the room. He was safe downstairs with a shelter volunteer, away from grown people's cruelty. Callan's face lost color. He stepped forward quickly and reached for Orin's hand. "Mr. Vale, this is a misunderstanding." Orin did not take his hand. He looked at Seller. "Is this the man?" Seller's voice was steady. "Yes." The room changed. Nola smiled tightly. "This is clearly a private family matter." Abel opened his folder. Forged documents and financial misrepresentation are not private family matters. Harper began with the first lie, Callan's claim that Seller had contributed nothing to his family or business. She placed Brina's medical receipts on the table. Then the recovery charts. Then the old notes showing Seller had managed Brina's care during the same period Callan's company survived its worst months. Callan tried to laugh. She helped around the house. That does not make her a business partner. Penn stood from the back of the room. She also organized the emergency vendor documents. I saw those files years ago, Callan knew. Callan turned on him. Penn's voice stayed quiet, and I saw the spousal consent page before Seller knew it existed. Harper placed the asset waiver on the screen. Seller's legal name was typed at the bottom. Seller Mills Reed. Beneath it was a penciled copy of her signature. Warren Pike leaned forward. That document was submitted to our review packet as pending execution. Callan's mouth opened. No words came. Then came Nola's note. Fear works faster than guilt. Nola stepped back. I had nothing to do with that. Harper showed the photo of the stolen medical receipt on Nola's phone, the message telling Callan to say Seller was unstable, and Dovey's report about the broken window. The room was silent now. Not shocked in a loud way. Worse, disgusted in a quiet way. Warren closed his folder. All investment decisions are frozen pending independent investigation. Callan looked as if the floor had disappeared. Brina stood shakily. I was sick. I did not know everything. Seller opened her old hospital folder and took out a folded note. The handwriting was weak, but clear. Seller, you are the daughter Mercy sent me. Brina's face crumpled. Seller placed the note on the table. You remembered when it helped you, she said. You forgot when it cost you pride. Callan turned to Seller, desperation replacing anger. I did not know who you were. Seller looked at him for a long moment. That was never the problem, she said. You knew who I was when your mother needed me. Orin's voice softened. What do you want done? Seller breathed in. I want my name cleared. I want the fraud exposed. I want the divorce. I want my belongings returned. And I want Marnie and Beck safe. The meeting collapsed after that. Callan followed Seller into the hallway. His voice dropped. You loved me before all this. You can't just turn that off. Seller turned to face him. Before she could answer, Brina cried out from the conference room. Her medication alarm was going off. Everyone turned to Seller out of habit. For the first time, Seller did not move. Brina's medication alarm screamed through the conference room. Everyone froze. The sound was small, just a sharp ringing from the little device in Brina's purse, but it carried 3 years of memory inside it. Seller knew that alarm. She knew what pill came next. She knew what Brina usually forgot to eat first. She knew what questions to ask. Once her body would have moved before her mind could think. Callan looked at her. Brina looked at her. Even Penn, Dovey, and the legal team turned slightly, as if the old order of the world had returned for one final second. Seller did not move. Callan's face tightened. Seller, Mom needs. She needs professional care, Seller said calmly. She looked at Harper. Please call the aide we arranged. Harper nodded and stepped away. Brina's face changed. Fear entered her eyes, not because Seller was cruel, but because Seller was no longer available. That was the punishment Brina had not prepared for. Seller would not let her suffer. But she would not become her servant again. A few minutes later, Haven Cole, 44, a professional medical aide from the licensed care agency Harper, had contacted that morning to ensure Brina's medical needs could not be used to pull Seller back into service, entered the room with a small medical bag. She checked Brina's medication, asked clear questions, and helped her sit properly. Brina watched Seller the whole time. You would have known what to do, Brina whispered. Seller held the old recovery folder in her hands. I did know, she said. That is why I left instructions. She placed the folder into Haven's hands. That folder had once been Sella's chain. Now it became her release. Brina's lips trembled. I called you my daughter when I was afraid. Sella's voice stayed soft, and treated me like a stranger when you felt strong. Brina closed her eyes. Callan stepped closer, desperate now. We can start over. With your father's help, everything could be different. Sella looked at him, and for the first time, she did not feel the old need to explain herself. You are not asking for me, she said. You are asking for the life you lost when you learned my name. Callan had no answer. Across the room, Nola was already moving toward the door. The scandal had swallowed the shine from her face. She told one investor she had been misled. She told another she barely knew anything about the papers. But the messages, the stolen receipt, the note, and the attempt to claim Sella's locket had tied her to the truth. No one reached for her coat. No one opened the door for her. She left wearing expensive fabric, but she looked colder than Sella had looked in the snow. The consequences came without shouting. Callan's investors froze every deal. Penn agreed to cooperate with the investigation. Dovey's photos and Marnie's statement became part of the legal record. Dax admitted Callan had ordered him to pack Sella's suitcase, keep her phone and purse in the house, and later retrieve the locket under Nola's instruction. The forged signature draft went to legal review. Callan was not destroyed by magic. He was destroyed by what he had done. Days turned into weeks. Sella did not move into Oren's life like a fairy tale had suddenly fixed her. She still woke some nights touching the locket, afraid the truth might disappear. She still flinched when headlights crossed snowy glass. She still struggled to believe love could come without usefulness attached. Oren understood. He did not rush her. One evening, he opened the locket carefully and placed inside it a restored photo of Sella's mother. I do not expect you to become my daughter in one day, Oren said. I am grateful I get to spend the rest of my life earning the right to know you. Sella cried then, but quietly. Not from weakness. From finally being wanted without needing to earn it. The certified DNA report arrived days later and confirmed what the emergency screen had already shown. Sella was Oren Vale's daughter. Not Sella Mills by accident. Not Sella Reed by marriage. Sella Vale by birth. Marnie and Bex were moved into safe housing. Oren helped with legal support for Marnie's unpaid child support case, but Sella made sure it did not feel like charity. She offered Marnie a paid role in the emergency care foundation she was building. You understand abandoned women better than any board member ever could, Sella told her. Marnie looked at the contract twice before signing. Not because she doubted Sella. Because life had taught her to read every promise carefully. Bex received school support, warm clothes, and a room with a real bed. Still, Marnie kept the old coat. She said it was ugly, thin, and missing a button, but it had told the truth when rich people lied. Months later, snow fell again. This time, Sella stood inside a warm building with bright windows and a sign above the entrance. The Little Star Care Center. It was a shelter and care support center for abandoned women, single mothers, caregivers who had given up their dreams, and wives trapped by money and fear. Sella had once used her savings to care for a woman who later betrayed her. Now she used her name, her story, and her power to care for women who had nowhere else to go. Marnie stood beside her. Bex held a tray of donated gloves. Oren watched from behind them, quiet and proud. Then the front door opened. A young woman stepped in from the cold, shaking, with no coat on her shoulders. Before Sella could speak, Marnie took a coat from the donation rack and wrapped it around the woman. Sella smiled. Outside, the snow kept falling, but it no longer looked like punishment. It looked like the beginning of every woman who would walk through that door and find out the cold was not the end of her story.